Chip came into the world on August 25, 1888, in Scranton, but his roots grew deep in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, now a part of the greater Pittsburgh sprawl. That's where he'd lace up his gloves the most, carving out his early story. His heritage traced back to Lithuania, and in his corner stood a manager named Jimmy Dime, a man who helped steer his journey. Before the ring ever called his name, Chip ran the fields in football cleats and swung a bat on dusty diamonds. But the real grind came underground, working long hours in the coal mines of Madison. It was there, beneath layers of earth and soot, that his future started to shift. In January 1909, with 20 winters behind him, he took a chance on a new path. The spark came from L.B. Lewis, a mining superintendent who saw something rare in him, something worth testing between the ropes. Chip's first bout was rough around the edges, but it ended with a second-round disqualification win over Billy Manfredo in Greensburg. A month later, he came back swinging, stopping both George Gill and John Chew. Through the rest of 1910, Chip kept racking up fights, and only one man got the better of him. He was just getting started. On October 11th, 1913, something unexpected rattled the walls of the old Pittsburgh City Hall on Market Square. The crowd had settled in for what looked like another routine defense by Frank Klaus, the reigning middleweight king. For 5 rounds, Chip had given them no reason to think otherwise. He was there, throwing punches, staying in the mix, but never close to stealing the spotlight. Then, in the dying moments of round 6, Chip slung a right hook that snapped Klaus's jaw and the rhythm of the fight all at once. The champion crumpled, and just like that, Chip had handed Klaus the first knockout of his career. The press circled the carcass of the bout, poking at Klaus's doughy midsection and speculating that he'd skimped on his road work. Some wrote that he hadn't taken Chip seriously, but Chip didn't ask for explanations. He just let the silence between the bell and the stunned crowd do the talking. Over the years, he tangled with Jack Dillon more than a handful of times over 10. In fact, Dillon, built like a fire hydrant and just as stubborn, often got the nod from the newspapers. He'd go on to wear the light heavyweight crown from 1914 to 1916 and take up residence in the Hall of Fame. Chip also squared off with a local brawler named Albert Buck Krause, a tough Pittsburgh product with a steel spine. They met 7 times, mostly in no-decision scraps that left fans arguing and scorecards unofficial. Only once did Buck manage to edge out a victory. The rest, just echoes of gloves and sweat hanging in the air, 2 fighters figuring each other out punch by punch. On November 25th, 1913, fresh off his title-clinching shocker, Chip stepped into the ring in Racine, Wisconsin, for a 10-round scrap with Tim O'Neill. There were no official scorecards that night. It was one of those no-decision bouts where only the ink of reporters decided a winner. The papers leaned Chip's way, but the stakes were higher than they looked. One bad punch, one stumble, and if O'Neill had managed to put Chip on the floor for good, the belt would have been gone. Then came December 23rd, back in Pittsburgh. Klaus wanted revenge. The press floated rumors that it was a title defense, but historians later shelved it under catchweight curiosities. Technically, no belt on the line. Still, what happened in the 5th round said more than any record book could. Chip floored Klaus twice, and when the referee waved it off, it was a second straight win over the man he'd taken the crown from. Official title bout or not, Chip's grip on the throne only got tighter. The new year opened with back-to-back battles in Milwaukee. On January 12, 1914, Chip danced 10 rounds with Gus Christie in another no-decision bout, with the newspapers once again calling it in his favor. And like before, a knockout loss would have cost him everything. 2 days later, he was back in the ring with Tim O'Neill for a rematch. This time, Chip didn't leave it to interpretation. He ended the night in the 2nd round with a punch that left no need for a headline. On April 7th, 1914, just half a year into his reign, Chip's hold on the middleweight crown came crashing down in a flash, an ending so abrupt it felt like the final page of a book had been torn out mid-sentence. His opponent that night was Al McCoy, a young left-hander not known for finishing power. With a knockout rate barely scratching 23%, McCoy wasn't exactly rattling glass jaws around the circuit. But what he had was a clever voice in his corner, Charlie Goldman, who whispered the kind of advice that flips the script. Goldman saw what others didn't. Chip, cautious by nature, would likely try to decode McCoy's southpaw rhythm before opening up. So, Goldman told his fighter to charge, fast and wild, before Chip could settle into the dance. And McCoy did just that. Seconds into the bout, McCoy whipped a left from somewhere down near his boots, a punch so raw and unexpected it caught Chip leaning the wrong way. It landed square on the chin, snapping his head back and lifting him off his feet. In just 1 minute and 50 seconds, it was over. The crown had slipped through Chip's fingers before the crowd had even gotten comfortable in their seats. The Broadway Sporting Club in Brooklyn wasn't packed that night. Folks figured McCoy would show up and collect a lesson. Instead, the few who came saw a king fall to a lightning bolt from an unlikely storm. Robert Edgren described it best. McCoy's left fist started somewhere near his knees. His body swung upward with the blow. His fist landed fairly on the point of the crouching champion's unguarded chin. Though Chip's time at the top was brief, his record speaks louder than his short reign. He stood across from just about every serious name circling the division, never ducked the tough ones, and punched his name into the pages that still get read. On December 7th, 1915, under the roof of Boston's Hippodrome, Chip's night unraveled in a way that left more questions than answers. He was squaring off against Jeff Smith, who would go on to wear the middleweight crown down under and had the upper hand through 6 rounds. But in the 7th, the tide turned not through fists, but by the referee's call. A low blow, they said. Chip was disqualified on the spot. Yet, as reported by the Newcastle News, many saw it differently. To them, the shot landed fair, and Chip looked to be closing in on a stoppage win before the ref stepped in. Just months earlier, between late 1914 and spring 1915, Chip had gone through a 4-fight chess match with Jimmy Clabby, a slick and sharp operator who never quite snagged a world title, but held enough regional belts, Australia's middle and light heavyweight titles, plus New Zealand's heavyweight strap to fill a steamer trunk. Their first meeting, a grueling 20-rounder on November 6, 1914, in Daly City near San Francisco, went badly for Chip. According to the San Francisco Chronicle, Clabby ran away with 17 of those rounds. Their March 22, 1915 encounter in Grand Rapids wasn't official on the books, a no-decision 6-rounder, but the press gave the edge to Clabby once again. Then came January 20th, 1916. Chip was back in Brooklyn at the Broadway Arena, staring down Al McCoy, the man who had taken his title in a flash of left-handed fury nearly 2 years prior. There was no belt on the line this time, but pride was thicker than gold, and Chip fought like a man reclaiming lost ground. According to the New York Times, he thumped McCoy from the opening bell. In round 3, McCoy hit the deck first for a short count, then again, staying down for 9 long seconds. The ropes groaned, the crowd leaned in, but McCoy, to his credit or sheer luck, stayed upright the rest of the way. The Pittsburgh Post didn't mince words. McCoy took a thrashing, and Chip pressed forward the entire fight. But boxing has its quirks. Despite absorbing the kind of punishment that lingers in the bones, McCoy stayed vertical long enough to hear the final bell, and with it, he held on to his title by nothing more than time and tenacity. On September 30th, 1916, Chip crossed oceans and found himself under the southern sun in Sydney, standing across from Les Darcy, Australia's pride and prize middleweight. The crowd had their money and their voices behind Darcy, and from the first bell, the Aussie didn't disappoint them. He pressed forward, sharp and relentless, until the 9th round, when he finally put Chip down for good. The title stayed home that night, and so did the roar of a country backing its man. But Chip wasn't done yet. Just over a month later, on November 6th in Melbourne, he reminded everyone he still packed a punch. He stopped American contender Art McGurl in the 14th round, a tough, dragging fight that saw Chip outlast and outslug his way to a much-needed win on foreign soil. Then came a series of battles that etched Chip deeper into boxing's blood-stained ledger, his 4-fight saga with the human whirlwind, Harry Greb. Their paths first crossed in Pittsburgh in 1915, a close and brutal affair that ended in a draw, but lit the spark for what would become a full-on rivalry. On June 26, 1916, they met again in Chip's own Newcastle. The local papers didn't hold back. The Herald gave Chip all 10 rounds, and the Post gave Greb only 3. Chip had cracked the Greb puzzle at least for a night, but Greb was a storm that only got harder to dodge. On May 22, 1917, In front of 4,000 roaring fans in Pittsburgh, Greb flipped the script, outworking Chip over 10 electric rounds. They met again that November in Cincinnati, and this time, Greb left no doubt, dominating the bout from bell to bell. Between 1917 and 1919, Chip entered the ring 3 times with Mike Gibbons, the slick technician whose movements looked like they were written in cursive. Their fights on July 4th, 1917, January 31st, 1919, and June 11th, 1919 rarely went Chip's way, at least in the eyes of the press. Gibbons, despite lacking official recognition as champion, held a reputation sharper than most belts. By the end, both BoxRec and the ring would rank him among the top 20 middleweights of all time. For Chip, these weren't just fights, they were chapters written against the best in the game, proof that even in the losses, he was always close enough to touch greatness. At right field in Youngstown, Ohio, July 1917, the stakes were sharpened like a razor. If George Chip managed to flatten Mike Gibbons, the title was as simple as that. But things didn't play out in Chip's favor. The Washington Post didn't bother dressing it up, writing plainly, Gibbons won all the way. The Harrisburg Telegraph added more color, noting that while Chip brought the heavier hands, Gibbons moved like he was painting brushstrokes, dodging, deflecting, returning fire with precision. The final 3 rounds gave the 5,000 fans their money's worth, with both men letting loose in bursts, but Gibbons was never truly in danger. Their next clash came in the winter freeze of January 1919 in Duluth. Gibbons, just back from 15 months in military gear, didn't miss a beat. He cruised to another win, this time by what papers called a wide margin. By June, the two were dancing again, this time in Terre Haute, Indiana, under a faster tempo. Chip did what he always did, threw heavy leather. But Gibbons, unfazed, weaved through it and stole the headlines once more. Chip also crossed paths 5 times with Tommy Gibbons, Mike's younger brother. The two never quite cracked in a Chip's win column, at least not through the lens of the ink-stained newspaper crowd. From 1918 to 1922, the wheels began to come off. 37 fights, just 4 victories. The man who once traded shots with legends began to fade from the fight game. He wrapped up his career in the spring of 22 after wins over Lou Shoup and Frankie McGuire, and then he stepped away. But time has a habit of writing its own final chapters. On November 4th, 1960, while walking near his home in Newcastle, Chip was struck by a car. The impact broke his neck and shattered his legs. 2 days later, on November 6th, he passed away at Newcastle Hospital, in the town he once turned into his battleground. His final bell came not in the ring, but on a quiet street, not with applause, but with silence.